Hello and welcome to Newsbreak at 7. I'm Veera Raghav. Our top focus this evening is an extremely interesting face-off between top global news organizations and OpenAI, one that could eventually define the relationship between artificial intelligence entities like ChatGPT and content creators globally. Leading global news organizations like the New York Times, Reuters, and the Australian Broadcast Corporation have blocked OpenAI or ChatGPT from accessing their content. Their primary concern is that products like ChatGPT, and this is not restricted to ChatGPT alone, are built on models trained by scanning enormous amount of data, including content created by news organizations. This is what trains what's known as their large language models or LLMs. However, there is no commercial benefit in the case of entities like ChatGPT to the content creator, according to these news organizations. Simply put, the entire training is based on content that's been created by someone else who gets no benefit. This could turn into a legal battle that could well define the need for an agreement between what a product like a ChatGPT, or for that matter, any such tool, can or cannot access, essentially ending their free run. This comes at a time when there is a serious debate over authorship of articles generated by AI. The question here is who is liable for those articles. So what is the way forward? How should this aspect of the relationship between AI and news media be defined? Remember, this is an emerging challenge across the world. Joining us this evening, Pankaj Mishra, journalist and co-founder of Factor Daily, Sriram Srinivasan, group digital editor of The Hindu, who has observed this issue very closely, and Jaspreet Bindra, who's also observed this very closely, founder of Tech Whisperer. Thank you three for joining us. My first question to you, Sriram Srinivasan, leaving aside the fact that you work for a large media organization and you may have a strategy or an evolving policy as far as AI is concerned, as an independent or an internet observer, do you believe that this tussle that we are seeing sparked off globally define the relationship as we go forward? Do you believe that other news organizations may also have to follow in these same lines and understand the relationship with entities like ChatGPT?
Thanks, Veera. On the face of it, the blocking per se, the signals that it emanates is far more interesting for me as an observer. The operational part isn't much to write about at this point of time, because whatever signals we get in the ecosystem is that the news industry is hardly been sort of affected at this point of time from ChatGPT like tools or services. But the signals are very interesting. Also, it points to the news industry taking a sort of proactive or preemptive step against an evolving technology, which is pretty rare if you see the history in the last 20, 30 years. So I think these are very early days for the technology, and there is considerable evidence but that this could be highly transformative, and that is what is bothering news publishers. And what is fascinating is how this will, as you said, play in the legal sphere, and that could essentially be a pointer to the direction this will take. And one more point to add is that this is not just a new technology, but the pioneer or the seeming pioneer in this new technology is a player outside the news ecosystem. So that's also a point to note.
That's an important point that you make there. Pankaj Mishra, as we go forward, how do you see this evolving? Because news organizations are also dependent on a lot of artificial intelligence tools. How are we going to define that relationship as we go forward?
We have seen this before. Every few years, there is a tech disruption or something that comes from a platform, and we see this whole thing play out again and again. So what we are seeing now is going to be a long, drawn negotiation. The licensing deal didn't work out between NY Times and OpenAI, so we are listening to these threats of suing them up and things like that. Look, notwithstanding the authorship or the liabilities and the copyright issues, the question for larger media is, you haggle with the same Googles and Facebooks of the world every time there is a new disruption. And then on the other hand, you start complaining about how platforms are disrupting you. So for me, because this has become a cyclical trend, it also raises a lot of questions about what side are you on? I mean, why do you keep waiting to get disrupted? what role are you going to play in innovating new products or creating new engagement models? Because this is going to go on. This is almost, this is a classic negotiation which is going on. So that aside, the deeper questions that we need to tackle are that of authorship. And US Patent Office from tomorrow is going to, is seeking all views and everything about what is authorship. And that is going to shape liability, copyright, and so on. But I'm sorry if I'm being a little brutal here, but I think for media, this is another mindless maze.
Okay, you make a very important point there, not something that may go down very well with our media friends, but Jasprit Brindra, it's a point to reflect on. Now, the core issue here, and I'm diverting from just this confrontation, looking at the larger aspect of it, is the question of authorship. The core of the argument is that, look, you are using content that I have created to train your modules or your bots to write the way I write, and you get me nothing in return. There seems to be a substantive argument there.
Veera, yes, it is an argument. But, just taking off from what my friend Pankaj just said, it is cyclical. It's something which repeats itself. And many public publishers and large media organizations have actually learned from the search wars, from the social media times, when in many ways the content which was being produced elsewhere, but the money was being produced on that content by these tech platforms. And so they don't want to be caught flat-footed in this case, and therefore some of these proactive things. It's not surprising. In fact, that even while New York Times, etc., are still thinking whether they will go to court or not, Getty Images has already sued Stability. A bunch of authors have come and said that, look, our original content is being encroached on and we are the owners of the content. Now, in the American world, there's this internet world, there's this concept of fair use, which says that content which is publicly out there can be used by anyone as long as what you're building for it does not compete against the producer of the content. So the crux which will lie in all these legal things about who owns the content, etc., will actually be in where the judiciary swings in terms of whether this is fair use or not fair use, whether ChatGPT will be competing with a New York Times or whether it will not be. And finally, all I would say is, and there have been some court judgments which have come out saying that a copyright cannot belong to a machine. It can only belong to a human being. And so that also gets into the mix. But the final thing I would say is that I think a lot of it is also posturing happening at this point of time. Because there are negotiations happening between these two. The tech platforms are willing to give away some of the money actually in this case, unlike the other cases in the past. But, there's posturing happening in terms of stopping the web crawlers, talking about suing, etc., so as to get a better deal. And so all of these different things are involved.
Right. I think the larger point that you're making, and going back to you, Pankaj, you made a very important point. It's more a process of having to learn to deal with these new disruptive technology that is coming up and understanding how to define our relationship with it. It's less at the moment, would you say, of a confrontation rather than more a process of understanding and learning and churning, which will result in some concrete sort of roadmap for this relationship.
Yes, absolutely. Because the technicalities such as authorship, copyright, they will take their own time. But what is happening is you can't create another agenda like this because you are unable to cope with the technology disruption. What is your relationship with your consumers? I think these are some very first principle questions that must be answered. The investments being made by media itself in technology is very sad. And every time we have seen in the past, a Facebook or a Google has launched something new, they have offered money for publishers and media companies to embrace those tools. So when it comes to efficiency, it's a different thing altogether. But when they don't get the deal, because I think larger platforms, they have gotten used to this cash that comes with every disruptive cycle. I'm going to say that because I have seen that play from inside the newsrooms and from tech lens as well. So that is the problem. I don't think there is any debate about authorship or the way musicians or artists are up against it. Everything is going to make AI fair. It's a long battle, but you can't draw these conclusions and get on this negotiation table on one hand taking money from them, on the other hand blaming them for your existential crisis.
Sriram Srinivasan, you want to weigh in on that?
I agree with the fact that a lot of publishers haven't invested enough in technology, but I think a legal challenge is a valid challenge. There is considerable amount of uncertainty about new technologies, and it's not just the journalism industry or the news industry. You'll see a lineup of these industries trying to get clarity on what it means, because what we are dealing with is completely new. And I think, in all fairness, you can actually divorce these two issues. One, which is that the media houses haven't done enough over the last 10, 20 years, perhaps. And the fact that these new technologies are redefining the way we live, we work, we create content, who gets credit, how does he or she get paid? All these are valid questions to ask. And as we discussed earlier, there are questions about our copyright laws. A non-human can't be given copyright authorship. So these issues remain, and it has to be sort of resolved at some point. And I see it as a good opportunity for the courts to clarify. For instance, if you look back at 2016, when the Supreme Court of the US actually sided with Google on its book digitization project, it basically said it's transformative. And you never know where this is going. So it's I think a legal challenge is a valid challenge, and I think this is the way forward for more clarity.
Important point that you make there. I'm just going to take this across and break this down as well. Jaspreet, Brinda, from you. One, how much does it limit the ability of a ChatGPT when top news organizations block it? B, where does the small content creator or the small author stand in this whole game? Now, it's between two giants at some level. Where does the small independent content creator stand in this whole argument?
So that's a very interesting point that you raised, and part of the work that I'm actually doing here in Cambridge, that's where I'm speaking to you from at the university, is related around that. The first point, how much will this matter to these big platforms or these AI engines now, if large companies shut down their web crawling gateways, etc.? Frankly, not much. The way these models are built, you've already taken in 99.99999 of what you want of the content, and if the last 0. whatever is shut off, the models are not built really for getting factual content. They are built to converse, they are built to generate, they are built to bring ideas, and all that can come from what's already here. Also, that same, if there's a piece of news which is blocked, that piece of news is going to come from multiple other sources, including small content creators. And so I don't think it really matters much. On the second bit, I think is the real concern. I believe that going forward, there will definitely be some arrangement between the large publishing houses and these big AI models and other engines, some kind of arrangement. And so both will be potentially happy and will go along. But It's, as always, the long tail which will have an effect unless a technology mechanism is built to avoid the long tail.
I think the long and short of your answer is that you're not going to be able to beat the bot, learn to live with it. Pankaj Mishra, that would be the final thought?
Yeah. No, I just want to make a point. I think, and Sriram and I have worked together earlier, we have had these debates one-on-one many times, and so with Jaspreet. I think it is time to redefine and revisit our social construct with consumers or readers of our content. It's time to go back to the communities we claim that we are serving, right? It's time to kind of do this value discovery on our own instead of leaving that on some page views or engagement metrics. For me, that is a more fundamental question, at least from journalism point of view. And as far as the smaller publishers or smaller authors are concerned, I don't think they will have time and resources to track this long drawn battle which is going on. A lot of them are going to go back to the drawing boards, redefine their engagement models with their communities. For me, that's a beautiful opportunity. And I think if we go back to the drawing board, revive our relationships with the communities we serve, I think business model and everything else will be an outcome. I'm hopeful.
You're hopeful. Interesting points made by all three of you. Remember, a year ago, Australia had enforced laws where Google had to pay for content that it accessed. So this is an emerging field, perhaps the need for legal frameworks. But we're running out of time on this show. Thank all three of you for joining us.